Senior Airman Olivia Ramirez wiped sweat from her brow as she worked in the sweltering heat of Bagram Air Base's maintenance hangar. The massive C-17 Globemaster loomed above her, its engines exposed as she meticulously inspected the complex turbofan. At 29, she was older than most senior airmen, having joined the Air Force after working for years in her family's auto shop in New Mexico. "Hey, Ramirez, Colonel wants this bird ready by 600 tomorrow," Technical Sergeant Wilson called from across the hangar. "Think you can handle that without screwing it up?" Olivia didn't look up from her work. "Yes, Sergeant, just finishing the last engine inspection now." Wilson lingered a moment longer than necessary. "Remember, by the book, I know you civilian mechanics like your shortcuts, but the Air Force doesn't work that way." "Understood, Sergeant," she replied evenly, hiding her frustration. After 6 months at Bagram, Olivia was still treated like an outsider. Despite her extensive mechanical knowledge from years working alongside her father and uncles, her fellow airmen seemed to view her civilian experience as a liability rather than an asset. Being one of the few female aircraft mechanics only compounded the problem. When Wilson finally walked away, Olivia let out a long breath. The C-17 was scheduled for a routine supply mission to a forward operating base tomorrow. Standard procedure, standard maintenance checks. Nothing she hadn't done a dozen times before. As she closed up the engine housing, Master Sergeant David Chen approached. Unlike most of the other NCOs, Chen had always treated Olivia with respect, recognizing her mechanical aptitude rather than focusing on her background. "How's it looking, Ramirez?" he asked, genuinely interested. "Good to go, Master Sergeant. All 4 engines are operating within optimal parameters. She's ready to fly." Chen nodded approvingly. "Nice work. You've got a good eye for these birds." "Thanks, sir. My dad always said I could hear what was wrong with an engine before I could see it." "Your dad sounds like a smart man." Chen paused, seeming to consider something. "Listen, Ramirez, there's a briefing at 1900 hours about tomorrow's mission. Normally it's just for flight crew and mission command, but I think you should be there too." Olivia looked up in surprise. "Me, sir, I'm just maintenance crew." "Just be there," Chen said with a slight smile. "Trust me on this." At 1900 hours sharp, Olivia slipped into the back of the briefing room. As expected, it was filled with officers and senior NCOs, pilots, loadmasters, and mission commanders. She felt distinctly out of place in her oil-stained uniform, but found a seat in the corner as instructed. Colonel James Harrison, the base operations commander, stood at the front of the room. "All right, people, let's get started. Tomorrow's mission has changed. We're no longer running supplies to Fob Eagle." He clicked to a slide showing a remote mountain location. "This is Outpost Sierra. 43 personnel, including a medical team, have been cut off due to increased enemy activity in the area. They're running critically low on medical supplies, ammunition, and food. We need to get them resupplied and fast." Olivia studied the image of the outpost. Unlike the larger forward operating bases, this appeared to be little more than a collection of fortified positions clinging to a mountainside. "The problem," Colonel Harrison continued, "is the landing zone." He clicked to the next slide, showing an aerial view of a crude airstrip. "This is their only runway. It's 3,500 feet long, unpaved, with a 2% grade and obstacles at both ends." A murmur ran through the room. Captain Mitchell, the mission pilot, spoke up. "Sir, the C-17 requires at least 7,000 feet for a safe landing and takeoff when fully loaded. That runway is half the minimum length." "I'm aware of that, Captain." Harrison's expression was grim. "That's why we're sending in a C-130 instead." Another officer raised his hand. "Sir, even a C-130 needs about 3,000 feet optimally, and that's without factoring in the high altitude, heat, and weight of the cargo. With those conditions, we'd need closer to 5,000 feet for safety." "The C-130 can make it work," Harrison insisted. "They've operated on shorter runways before." "With much lighter loads, sir," Captain Mitchell pointed out, "and not at 7,000 feet elevation in summer heat. The density altitude will be through the roof." Olivia listened intently. Aircraft performance decreased significantly at high altitudes and high temperatures, something every pilot and mechanic understood. The thin air meant less lift for the wings and less oxygen for the engines. Add a heavy cargo load and a short runway, and it became a potentially deadly equation. "The alternative is a helicopter resupply," Harrison said, "which means multiple trips over territory with known anti-aircraft threats. We've already lost 2 choppers in that region." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Either risk a fixed-wing aircraft on a dangerously short runway or risk multiple helicopter crews on repeated trips through hostile airspace. "We'll make it work with the C-130, Harrison decided. "Captain Mitchell, you'll pilot. Loadmaster will calculate maximum cargo weight based on conditions." As the briefing continued with mission details, Olivia's mind worked through the problem. The C-130 was indeed more capable of short-field operations than the C-17, but even so, the margin for error would be dangerously thin. One miscalculation, one moment of hesitation during takeoff, and the aircraft might not achieve the velocity needed to become airborne before running out of runway. After the briefing concluded, she approached Master Sergeant Chen. "Sir, I don't understand why I was here for this." Chen led her to a quieter corner. "Because you have skills and knowledge most Air Force mechanics don't, Ramirez. I've seen your personnel file. Before joining up, you worked on racing planes with your uncle in New Mexico, specialized in engine modifications for high-performance aircraft in extreme conditions." Olivia stiffened. "That was civilian work, sir, different regulations." "Different regulations, same physics." Chen lowered his voice. "Captain Mitchell is one of our best pilots, but even he's concerned about tomorrow's mission. The runway at Outpost Sierra sits at 7,200 feet elevation. Daytime temperatures are forecast at 95 degrees. That puts the density altitude at nearly 11,000 feet. Meaning significantly reduced engine performance and lift." Olivia nodded, understanding perfectly. "Exactly. Now officially we're going to lighten the load as much as possible, use every approved technique for short-field takeoff, and pray it's enough." Chen held her gaze meaningfully. "But unofficially, I want you to inspect that C-130 tonight. Make sure it's performing at absolute peak efficiency." The implication was clear. Chen wanted her to do more than a standard inspection. "Sir, any modifications outside of technical orders would be against regulations," Olivia said carefully. "I'm not suggesting modifications, Airman, just a very, very thorough inspection." Chen's expression remained neutral. "The kind of inspection your father might do before a particularly challenging situation." Olivia thought of her father, Miguel Ramirez, and the techniques he developed during his years working on aircraft in the harsh conditions of the New Mexico desert. Techniques that pushed the boundaries of official maintenance protocols, but had saved countless pilots in difficult situations. "I understand, Master Sergeant," she said quietly. "I'll give that C-130 my complete attention." Later that night, Olivia stood alone in the dimly lit hangar, staring up at the C-130 Hercules that would fly tomorrow's critical mission. The massive cargo aircraft seemed to be waiting expectantly, its 4 turboprop engines silent, but holding potential energy that would mean life or death for the crew and the isolated soldiers depending on the supplies it would carry. She thought about what Chen had asked of her without actually asking, and she thought about her father's voice, a constant presence in her mind whenever she worked on aircraft. "Sometimes, Mija," he would say, "the manual tells you one thing, but the situation demands another. In those moments you have to trust what you know, not just what you're told." Her father had developed techniques during his years, working as a mechanic for bush pilots in Alaska and small racing aircraft in the Southwest. Techniques that were technically outside official protocols, but had repeatedly proven effective in extreme conditions. One method in particular came to mind, a carefully calibrated adjustment to the fuel delivery system that increased power output during the critical moments of takeoff. It wasn't in any Air Force technical order. It wouldn't pass an official inspection. But it could give a heavily loaded aircraft the extra thrust needed to get airborne when the margin for error was measured in feet rather than miles. Olivia checked her watch. It was just past midnight. The mission was scheduled for 700 hours. She had time. Looking around to ensure she was truly alone, she opened her personal toolkit, the one her father had given her when she enlisted, containing specialized instruments and tools not included in standard Air Force equipment. "This is for the situations they don't teach you about in training," he'd told her. "Use it wisely." Olivia took a deep breath and made her decision. 43 lives at Outpost Sierra were depending on this aircraft reaching them with critical supplies. The pilot was depending on this aircraft performing at its absolute best to get off that mountain safely. She would do what needed to be done, regulations or not. Opening the first engine cowling, she began to work. Part 2, the modification. The pre-dawn air at Bagram carried a brief respite from the Afghan summer heat as Olivia watched the ground crew load the final pallets onto the C-130. She had worked through the night, carefully implementing her father's technique on all 4 of the aircraft's engines, then meticulously covering her tracks to ensure the modifications wouldn't be detected during routine inspections. "You look tired, Ramirez," Master Sergeant Chen observed, appearing beside her as the loading operation continued. "Late night." "Yes, sir," she replied simply. "Wanted to make sure everything was perfect." Chen studied her face for a moment. "And is it?" Olivia met his gaze steadily. "The aircraft is operating at peak efficiency, sir. I'm confident it will perform to the best of its capabilities." Chen nodded, seeming to understand what she wasn't saying. "Good work. Captain Mitchell will appreciate that." Speaking of the pilot, Olivia watched as he conducted his pre-flight inspection, moving around the aircraft with focused attention. Captain Mitchell was known as one of the most skilled C-130 pilots in the squadron, exactly the person you'd want at the controls for a mission this challenging. As Mitchell approached the engines, Olivia felt her heart rate increase. Would he notice anything different? Her modifications were subtle, designed to be invisible to anyone not specifically looking for them, but Mitchell had thousands of hours on C-130s. He knew these aircraft intimately. The captain paused at the first engine, leaning in slightly closer than usual. Olivia held her breath. Then he moved on, continuing his inspection without comment. When Mitchell finished his walk-around, he approached Olivia and Chen. "Maintenance report," he asked. "All systems operational, sir," Olivia reported formally. "Engines performing within optimal parameters, control surfaces responding normally, no anomalies detected during overnight inspections." Mitchell nodded, but his expression remained concerned. "We're still heavy for that runway. Loadmaster has cut everything non-essential, but we're still pushing the limits of what's theoretically possible, especially given the density altitude we're expecting." "The aircraft is ready, sir," Olivia assured him, putting subtle emphasis on her words. "I personally guarantee it will give you everything it's got." Something in her tone made Mitchell look at her more closely. After a moment, a flicker of understanding crossed his face. "I appreciate your thoroughness, Airman Ramirez," he said carefully. "It's good to know my aircraft has been in capable hands." As the captain walked away to join his crew for final briefing, Chen spoke quietly. "He knows something's different." "Yes, sir, but he won't ask what." "Plausible deniability," Chen nodded. "Smart pilot." Olivia watched as the flight crew completed their preparations. The mission was high-risk enough that Colonel Harrison himself had come to oversee the departure. The base commander stood nearby, speaking with the mission commander while occasionally glancing at the loaded aircraft. "What exactly did you do to it?" Chen asked softly, ensuring no one could overhear. Olivia hesitated, then decided Chen deserved to know. "Modified the fuel management system to deliver a richer mixture during the initial takeoff phase," she explained in a near whisper. "It gives about 8% more power for the first 2 minutes of operation. The engines run hotter, but well within their structural limits. And after those 2 minutes, the system automatically reverts to standard operation. No permanent changes, no damage to the engines. They'll never even know it was done once they're airborne." Chen let out a low whistle. "That's creative. My father developed the technique for bush planes in Alaska. Short runways, heavy loads, high elevations, similar challenges to what they're facing today." "And it's safe," Chen's voice carried genuine concern. Olivia nodded firmly. "Absolutely safe. The Pratt & Whitney T-56 engines on the C-130 have substantial design tolerance. This just utilizes more of their true capacity during the critical phase when it's needed most." Before Chen could respond, an approaching officer caused them both to straighten up and fall silent. It was Lieutenant Colonel Garcia, the squadron's maintenance officer. "Master Sergeant Airman," he greeted them. "Everything ready with our Hercules." "Yes, sir," Chen responded. "Airman Ramirez completed a comprehensive inspection overnight. The aircraft is in optimal condition." Garcia looked at Olivia appraisingly. Good work, Ramirez. This is a critical mission. Thank you, sir. As Garcia walked away, Olivia felt a mix of pride and anxiety. Pride in her work, anxiety about the risks she'd taken. If anything went wrong with the aircraft, the investigation would eventually lead back to her unauthorized modifications. Her career in the Air Force would be over. Possibly worse, given that lives were at stake. But the alternative, doing nothing special while knowing the aircraft might not make it off that mountain runway, was unthinkable. The startup sequence began, and Olivia watched intently as the C-130's massive propellers began to turn. The 4 Allison T-56 turboprops roared to life one by one, each running through the standard power check sequence. To most observers, they sounded normal, but Olivia's trained ear caught the subtle difference. A slightly deeper timbre, a marginally sharper response to throttle input. Captain Mitchell conducted his engine checks, and Olivia could see his expression change slightly as he tested each engine's response. The modifications were working perfectly, giving him access to that crucial additional power margin without being obvious enough to raise alarms. As the C-130 taxied toward the runway, Master Sergeant Chen placed a hand briefly on Olivia's shoulder. "Well done, Ramirez. Now we wait." The massive cargo plane took off without incident from Bagram's long runway. The real test would come at the other end, at Outpost Sierra's dangerously short airstrip high in the mountains. Throughout the day, Olivia went about her regular duties, but her mind remained on the C-130 and its crew. The mission had an estimated return time of 1,800 hours, assuming all went well. Each passing hour brought increased tension. At 17:30, word came that the aircraft had successfully delivered its cargo to Outpost Sierra and was on its return leg. Olivia felt the first wave of relief. They had managed to land safely on the short runway. But the more challenging test was the takeoff from that same airstrip, fully loaded with gravity working against them on the upsloping runway. By 1745, a small crowd had gathered near the operations center, waiting for news. Colonel Harrison was there, along with several officers and NCOs with connections to the mission. Olivia stood slightly apart with Master Sergeant Chen, both of them knowing more than they could admit. "Tower reports radio contact," someone announced. "They're 15 minutes out." The collective relief was palpable. If they were that close, it meant they'd successfully taken off from Outpost Sierra. When the C-130 appeared in the distance, a spontaneous cheer went up from the gathered personnel. The aircraft made a standard approach and landed smoothly on Bagram's runway. As the plane taxied to its parking position, Olivia studied it carefully, looking for any signs of unusual stress or damage. Nothing was visibly amiss. The crew disembarked, looking tired but triumphant. Captain Mitchell was immediately surrounded by officers wanting first-hand accounts of the mission. Olivia watched from a distance, not wanting to draw attention to herself. To her surprise, after briefly speaking with Colonel Harrison, Mitchell broke away from the group and walked directly toward her. "Airman Ramirez," he said formally, "a word, please." Olivia followed him to a quiet spot away from the others, her heart pounding. This was it. He was going to confront her about the modifications. Once they were alone, Mitchell's formal demeanor softened slightly. That runway was 3,500 feet of packed dirt at 7,200 feet elevation. Temperature on the ground was 93 degrees. By all standard performance charts, taking off with our cargo load should have been impossible. Olivia remained silent, uncertain how to respond. "The engines performed remarkably well," Mitchell continued, choosing his words carefully. "Better than I've ever experienced in similar conditions. We cleared the end of the runway with about 50 feet to spare." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "Care to explain how that was possible?" Olivia took a deep breath. "Sir, I performed a standard pre-flight inspection and ensured all systems were operating within their design parameters." Mitchell held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Well, whatever standard inspection you performed, it saved 43 lives at Outpost Sierra, not to mention my crew." His voice dropped to near a whisper. "And if anyone ever asks me if there was anything unusual about the aircraft, I'll tell them it performed exactly as a properly maintained C-130 should." With that, he turned and walked away, rejoining the debriefing group. Master Sergeant Chen appeared at her side. "Everything okay?" Olivia nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. relief, pride, lingering anxiety. Yes, sir, just receiving compliments on the standard maintenance work. Chen smiled knowingly. Standard work, right. He glanced toward the returning crew. You know, Ramirez, there's a saying in aviation, there are old pilots and bold pilots, but few old, bold pilots. The exception is when they have exceptional mechanics keeping them safe. Later that evening, alone in her quarters, Olivia finally allowed herself to fully process what had happened. Her forbidden technique, her father's legacy, had made the impossible possible. Lives had been saved, but she had violated regulations, taken risks that could have ended her career or worse. The question that kept her awake was not whether she'd made the right choice today, but what would happen the next time such a situation arose. And there would be a next time. That was the nature of military aviation in a combat zone. As she finally drifted toward sleep, her father's voice echoed in her mind. Rules exist for good reasons, Mija, but sometimes the highest rule is to bring everyone home alive. Today, everyone had come home alive. For now, that would have to be enough. 3 days after the Outpost Sierra mission, Olivia was summoned to Colonel Harrison's office. The base commander rarely dealt directly with enlisted personnel, especially junior NCOs like herself. Being called to his office could only mean something significant and potentially troubling. Airman Ramirez reporting as ordered, sir, she announced, standing at attention before his desk. At ease, Ramirez, Harrison replied, looking up from a folder of documents. Have a seat. Olivia sat stiffly, her mind racing through possibilities. Had someone reported her unauthorized modifications? Was there an investigation underway? I've been reviewing the after-action reports from the Outpost Sierra resupply mission, Harrison began, his expression unreadable. Captain Mitchell's report specifically mentions the exceptional performance of the aircraft despite environmental conditions that should have made the mission nearly impossible. Olivia remained silent, waiting. In fact, Harrison continued, based on standard performance metrics for a C-130J operating at that elevation and temperature with that payload, they shouldn't have been able to take off from that runway. He fixed her with a penetrating gaze. Yet they did, with some margin to spare. Any thoughts on how that was possible? This was the moment Olivia had been dreading. She had two choices, lie to a superior officer or admit to violations that could end her career. Neither option seemed good. Sir, I conducted thorough maintenance before the mission to ensure optimal performance, she replied carefully. So I've heard. Harrison leaned back in his chair. I've also heard from Captain Mitchell that you personally guaranteed the aircraft would give everything it had. That's unusually confident language from a maintenance technician. I take pride in my work, sir. Harrison studied her for a moment, then sighed. Ramirez, let me be direct. Air Force Engineering is conducting a formal review of this mission because the performance doesn't match our established models. They're trying to determine if our performance charts need updating or if there's something else at play. He paused. They'll be inspecting that particular C-130 thoroughly. Olivia felt her stomach drop. A thorough engineering inspection might detect traces of her modifications, even though she'd returned the systems to standard configuration after the aircraft returned. I see, sir, she managed to respond, her voice steady despite her internal panic. Before they arrive, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with, Harrison said bluntly. This conversation is off the record. I want the truth, Airman. Olivia hesitated, weighing her options. Master Sergeant Chen had tacitly approved her actions, but he couldn't protect her from a formal investigation. Captain Mitchell seemed to understand something unusual had happened, but had chosen not to pursue it. But Colonel Harrison was directly asking for the truth. After a long moment, she made her decision. Sir, I implemented a temporary modification to the fuel management system that allowed for increased power output during the critical takeoff phase, she admitted quietly. It's a technique developed by my father for civilian aircraft operating in extreme conditions. The modification was removed upon the aircraft's return, with no permanent changes to any systems. Harrison's expression remained neutral. And this modification is not in any Air Force technical order or maintenance protocol, I assume. No, sir, it's not. So you violated maintenance regulations, potentially risked an aircraft and crew, and deliberately circumvented the chain of command. Harrison's voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. Yes, sir. Olivia met his gaze steadily. I believed it was necessary to ensure mission success and crew safety given the conditions at Outpost Sierra. Harrison was silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he spoke again. The personnel at Outpost Sierra were running dangerously low on medical supplies. 2 soldiers had been wounded in an attack the day before. Without the resupply, the medical team estimated they had less than 48 hours before they would run out of critical medications. Olivia hadn't known these details before. The stakes had been even higher than she'd realized. Captain Mitchell is one of our most experienced pilots, Harrison continued. In his after-action report, he stated that even with his skills under the conditions present, taking off from that runway should have been beyond the aircraft's capabilities. Yet it wasn't. He tapped the folder before him. He credits the maintenance team, specifically you, with making the impossible possible. I appreciate Captain Mitchell's confidence, sir, Olivia responded cautiously. Harrison leaned forward. Here's my dilemma, Ramirez. Your actions clearly violated regulations. In peacetime, under normal circumstances, that would mean serious disciplinary action, possibly even discharge. But we're not in peacetime, and these weren't normal circumstances. He stood, walking to the window that overlooked the flight line. The Air Force has regulations for good reasons: safety, standardization, accountability. But sometimes in combat zones, strict adherence to every regulation isn't always possible, or even desirable. He turned to face her again. Your father, he taught you this technique. Yes, sir. Miguel Ramirez. He was a mechanic for bush pilots in Alaska and later worked on racing aircraft in New Mexico. He developed several techniques for enhancing engine performance in challenging conditions. And he passed this knowledge to you, despite knowing it might conflict with military regulations if you ever enlisted. Olivia nodded. He told me to use my judgment, sir, to understand when following the book was the right choice and when extraordinary circumstances might require extraordinary solutions. Harrison returned to his desk, his expression thoughtful. The engineering team arrives tomorrow. They'll spend several days examining the aircraft and reviewing all mission data. If they find evidence of unauthorized modifications, there will be a formal investigation. I understand, sir, Olivia replied, resigned to the consequences of her actions. Which is why, Harrison continued, that C-130 is currently undergoing a complete standard overhaul under Master Sergeant Chen's supervision. Any trace of non-standard configurations will be eliminated before the engineering team arrives. Olivia looked up in surprise. Sir. Officially, I know nothing about any modifications, Harrison said firmly. As far as I'm concerned, Captain Mitchell and his crew completed an extremely challenging mission due to exceptional piloting and properly maintained equipment. That's what my report will state. Relief washed over Olivia, quickly followed by confusion. May I ask why, sir? Harrison's expression softened slightly. Because 43 American personnel are alive and safe right now due in part to your actions. Because sometimes in war the right thing and the by-the-book thing aren't the same. He paused. But don't mistake this for blanket approval, Airman. Regulations exist for vital reasons. Unauthorized modifications can be dangerous, even deadly, without proper testing and oversight. I understand completely, sir. Good, Harrison sat back down. Because I have a proposal for you. Instead of disciplinary action, I want you to document your technique, in detail, for formal evaluation by Air Force Engineering. If it proves to be as effective and safe as it appeared during the Sierra mission, it could potentially be adapted into official protocols for emergency situations. Olivia was stunned. You want me to share my father's technique officially? With full credit to both of you, Harrison confirmed. The military has a long history of adopting innovations that originated outside official channels, but they need to be properly tested, refined, and standardized before being implemented across the force. The offer was unexpected but made perfect sense. Rather than punishing her for breaking the rules, Harrison was offering a path to potentially change the rules, to take a forbidden technique and make it an authorized option for critical missions. I would be honored to document the technique, sir, Olivia said sincerely. My father would be proud to know his work might help Air Force crews. I expect a detailed report within 2 weeks, Harrison said, his formal demeanor returning. In the meantime, you'll assist Master Sergeant Chen with preparations for the engineering inspection. Dismissed, Airman. As Olivia left the office, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Instead of ending her career, her risk-taking might actually advance it, and more importantly, might save other crews facing impossible takeoffs in the future. Master Sergeant Chen was waiting outside, his expression questioning. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly as they walked away from the command offices. "Better than okay," Olivia replied, still processing what had happened. "The colonel wants me to document my father's technique for official evaluation." Chen's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected, good but unexpected." "There's still the engineering inspection to get through," Olivia noted, suddenly remembering that hurdle. "Don't worry about that," Chen assured her with a slight smile. "The bird's already been returned to pristine factory condition. They won't find anything unless they know exactly what to look for." Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia split her time between her regular duties and meticulously documenting her father's technique. What had once been knowledge passed down verbally, through hands-on training, now had to be captured in precise technical language, with diagrams, performance calculations, and safety parameters. She found herself calling her father frequently, verifying details and discussing how to best translate his decades of practical experience into the formal language of Air Force technical documentation. "I never thought I'd see the day when the military would be interested in my little tricks," Miguel Ramirez commented during one such call. "Makes me wish I'd written them down years ago." "They're not tricks, Dad," Olivia corrected him. "They're innovative engineering solutions developed under field conditions without the benefit of corporate R&D departments." Her father laughed. "Is that how you're describing it in your report?" "Something like that," she admitted with a smile. "Though I'm making sure they understand these techniques were developed through years of practical experience, not just theory." "That's my girl," Miguel said proudly. "Just make sure they understand the limitations and safety margins. These aren't everyday techniques, therefore when the standard approach won't cut it." "I'm being very clear about that," Olivia assured him. "Colonel Harrison understands it too. He's framing it as an emergency protocol, not a standard operating procedure." As promised, the engineering team spent several days examining the C-130 that had flown the Outpost Sierra mission, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Master Sergeant Chen had been thorough in returning the aircraft to its standard configuration. When Olivia finally submitted her report, titled Enhanced Performance Protocols for Emergency Short Field Operations, it ran to over 50 pages of detailed technical information, complete with performance calculations, risk assessments, and implementation guidelines. Colonel Harrison reviewed it personally before forwarding it to Air Force Engineering Command with his endorsement. What happened next was out of Olivia's hands and would take time to work through the military's extensive evaluation process. In the meantime, life at Bagram returned to its normal rhythm. Olivia continued her maintenance duties, though she noticed a subtle change in how she was treated by both peers and superiors. Word had somehow spread, not of her specific actions, but of her role in the successful Outpost Sierra mission. The outsider had become an accepted member of the team. One evening, as she finished her shift, Captain Mitchell approached her on the flight line. "Airman Ramirez," he greeted her, "got a minute?" "Of course, sir." Mitchell gestured toward his aircraft, the same C-130 from the Sierra mission. "I'm scheduled for another difficult run tomorrow, not as tight as Sierra, but challenging. Mind giving my bird another one of your standard inspections?" The question carried clear meaning. Despite the risk and the official procedures now in motion, Mitchell was asking her to implement her modification again for another critical mission. Olivia considered her response carefully. "I'd be happy to inspect your aircraft, sir, but I'm afraid all my maintenance work is strictly by the book these days." Mitchell studied her for a moment, then nodded with understanding. "Fair enough. The official evaluation process needs to run its course." He offered his hand. "Just wanted to thank you again for Sierra. That was some of the finest aircraft performance I've ever experienced." As they shook hands, Olivia felt a sense of professional pride unlike anything she'd experienced before. Her father's knowledge, once forbidden in military contexts, was now being officially evaluated for potential adoption. The line between unauthorized modification and innovative solution was being redrawn, partially due to her willingness to take a calculated risk when lives were at stake. "Just doing my job, sir," she replied with a smile, "the best way I knew how." 18 months after the Outpost Sierra mission, Technical Sergeant Olivia Ramirez stood before a classroom of Air Force maintenance personnel at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. The promotion to Tech Sergeant had come through 6 months earlier, along with a transfer from Afghanistan to the Air Force's primary training center for aircraft maintenance. "Welcome to the first official training session on emergency performance enhancement protocols," she began, surveying the 24 students, a mix of experienced NCOs and younger airmen selected for their aptitude and problem-solving abilities. "What you learn in this classroom is not standard maintenance procedure. It is to be implemented only under specific emergency conditions when standard performance parameters are insufficient for mission success and lives are at risk." On the screen behind her was the official Air Force technical document titled AFTO 42B12, Emergency Performance Enhancement for C-130 series aircraft. What had started as her father's forbidden technique had, after extensive testing and refinement, become an official, though highly restricted, Air Force protocol. The journey from that night in Bagram to this classroom had been long and sometimes difficult. The initial engineering evaluation had led to 6 months of rigorous testing at Edwards Air Force Base, where her father's technique had been systematically analyzed, slightly modified to meet military standards, and thoroughly documented. Olivia had been temporarily assigned to the testing program, working alongside engineers and test pilots to ensure the practical knowledge behind the technique wasn't lost in the technical translation. Her father had even been brought in as a civilian consultant, his decades of experience finally receiving official recognition. The foundations of these protocols were developed by civilian aircraft mechanics working in extreme conditions, Olivia explained to her class, advancing to a slide that showed a Bush plane taking off from a dangerously short airstrip in Alaska. Specifically, by Miguel Ramirez and other mechanics who served remote communities where standard operating procedures often couldn't address the unique challenges they faced. She could see interest spark in the eyes of her students, particularly the more experienced maintainers who understood the sometimes frustrating limitations of by-the-book maintenance in real-world situations. "The Air Force has adapted these techniques through extensive testing and documentation," she continued. "What you'll learn here has been approved at the highest levels, but remains classified as emergency protocol only. Implementation without proper authorization still constitutes a violation of standard maintenance procedures." Over the next 3 days, Olivia taught the detailed technical aspects of what was now officially called Enhanced Emergency Power Output Modification, the precise adjustments to fuel delivery systems that could give aircraft engines that crucial extra power during the most critical phases of flight. On the final day of training, Colonel James Harrison, now stationed at Pentagon as part of the Air Force Engineering Command, made a surprise appearance. Olivia called the class to attention as he entered. "As you were," Harrison said, waving them back to their seats. "I'm not here for formalities. I'm here because what you're learning in this room has already saved lives and will save more in the future." He recounted the Outpost Sierra mission, careful to present it as an example of exceptional airmanship and the need for emergency protocols rather than a story about unauthorized modifications. "Sometimes in combat you face impossible choices," Harrison told the class. "When Technical Sergeant Ramirez was still Airman Ramirez, she faced such a choice. Her actions, which at the time went beyond authorized procedures, directly contributed to saving 43 American personnel cut off at a remote outpost." Olivia stood quietly at the side of the room, remembering the fear and uncertainty she'd felt that night in the hangar at Bagram. "Rather than simply disciplining her for thinking outside the box," Harrison continued, "we chose to examine what she did, test it thoroughly, and where appropriate, bring it inside the box." He gestured to the technical manuals on their desks. "That's what you're holding, the result of recognizing innovation rather than simply punishing rule-breaking." After the class was dismissed, Harrison approached Olivia. "The program's going well," he observed. 5 successful emergency implementations in the past year, 3 in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, 1 during that hurricane evacuation in the Philippines." Olivia nodded. "The feedback from the field has been positive. We're already incorporating some refinements based on operational experience." "Your father must be proud," Harrison said. "Not many people get to see their life's work adopted by the military." "He is," Olivia confirmed with a smile. though he still insists his original version was better before the engineers complicated it. Harrison laughed. Sounds like a true mechanic. His expression grew more serious. There's another reason I'm here, Sergeant Ramirez. We're expanding the program. Sir? The success with the C-130 protocols has convinced leadership to explore similar emergency enhancements for other aircraft. C-17s, C-5s, even some fighter platforms where applicable. Harrison handed her a folder. We're establishing a dedicated technical team at Edwards. I want you to lead the maintenance component. Olivia opened the folder to find transfer orders to Edwards Air Force Base and a position description that made her breath catch: Chief of Emergency Performance Protocols, with responsibilities spanning multiple aircraft types and a team of 8 maintenance specialists under her supervision. This is a significant step up, sir, she said, processing the opportunity. You've earned it, Harrison replied simply. You understand better than anyone the balance between necessary regulations and necessary exceptions. That's exactly the perspective we need leading this program. Later that evening, Olivia called her father to share the news. After congratulating her, Miguel Ramirez was quiet for a moment. You know what this means, don't you, Mija? He finally said. What's that, Dad? All those techniques I taught you, the ones we had to keep quiet about when you joined up, they won't be forbidden anymore. They'll be official. His voice carried a mix of pride and amusement. 40 years of being told I was doing it wrong, and now the Air Force is making manuals out of my methods. Olivia smiled. Not all of them, just the ones that passed rigorous testing and safety evaluation. Details, details, her father dismissed playfully. The point is, what was once forbidden is now saving lives with official blessing. That's a legacy to be proud of. As she packed for her transfer to Edwards, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From being an outsider at Bagram, viewed with skepticism because of her civilian background, to now leading a program that would bridge the gap between by-the-book military procedures and the practical innovations developed by mechanics like her father. The forbidden trick that had once risked her career had instead defined it, transforming not just her own path, but potentially the lives of crews and passengers who would never know her name but would benefit from her willingness to step beyond the boundaries when circumstances demanded it. In the end, the most important regulations were the ones that couldn't be written in any manual. Use your judgment, trust your training, and when lives are at stake, find a way to bring everyone home safely, even if that means bending a few rules along the way.